Hey everybody, I'm trying to shoot a video about Brackish Basics tonight, and I simply want to just go over some real basic stuff about a brackish tank and how to set one up and maintain it. And I keep getting distracted by this, that, or the other thing. So I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. I'm not going to get into talking about the animals or anything like that. I simply want to define brackish water. Brackish water is water that is saltier than fresh water, but not as salty as ocean water. And when I say salty, I am talking about marine salts and not aquarium salt. Aquarium salt is simply sodium chloride and does not contain all of the many and varied minerals and salts that marine salts have. So when I mix up my brackish water, I do use the Instant Ocean brand marine salts. I just don't mix it up to the same degree or salinity that you would if you were mixing it up for your marine tank. Now, in terms of salinity, that is measured in specific gravity, or you'll see it listed as SG. So brackish water starts, well, fresh water, pure water is 1.000 specific gravity. The denser the water gets, or the more dissolved salts that are in it, the heavier we can say it gets, and its specific gravity gets heavier. That's the water density, basically. So as the salt levels increase and you get up to 1.005 specific gravity, that is where you make that transition between what would be considered freshwater and now you are into what would be thought of as brackish water. And as the salinity increases, you get up to about 1.015, and after that you're no longer really in brackish water. You're starting to get into what would be considered low-end marine water. Now, the reason brackish water has such a wide range that is still considered brackish, and there is no real specific definitive salinity level that makes it brackish, is because of the nature of where these systems occur in the wild. And that is generally in an estuary system, or anywhere where a freshwater body flows into a saltwater body. It's where rivers flow into the ocean, harbors, bays, any place like that where you're going to get these tidal sort of transitional zones. So if we imagine we're heading downriver and we're heading out to sea, as you go further and further downriver, there's going to come a point where you start encountering some salty water. Gradually, as that water gets saltier and saltier, there's going to become a point where you can no longer call it fresh water. It has to be called brackish water. As we continue our journey towards the ocean, you will get saltier and saltier, and eventually you will get to a point where it can no longer be called brackish water, and then you are in marine water. So when you're in that transitional zone, depending on if there were heavy rains last night bringing lots of fresh water down, or if there's a storm coming in that's pushing a big tidal surge ahead of it, any given place within that estuary system, the salinity can change pretty dramatically, even just with tidal shifts throughout the day. The way salinity works in water, you will often get layering, where you get different layers of salinity in the water. If you've ever seen where water looks like sort of weird and hazy, like almost like a heat haze in the water, that's usually a haline separation, where saltier water is separated from fresher water. So a lot of times animals that are living in these environments can go from one salinity gradient to the next very rapidly. They don't even have to move position. They can simply go deeper or shallower in the water column, and they can shift the salinity that they're in fairly quickly, fairly dramatically. So I know I said I wasn't going to talk a lot about the animals, but that's just basically a rundown on what a brackish environment would be like in the wild and the animals that can live in it. And when I do the video about the actual animals, all of that's going to be a little more pertinent and significant. For my purposes, I am about to explain how I maintain my brackish tank, and the fact that the animals can adjust for changing salinity so easily is important. It's important in the sense that it makes you maintaining your brackish tank much, much easier than you would think. When you maintain a marine tank, you have to keep the specific gravity very stable. Depending on the animals you have in there, I mean, sometimes you need to keep it very, very stable. Even the increase in specific gravity you might get from just letting some water evaporate out of the tank and concentrating the salts a little more might be enough to stress or even kill some animals. These animals are not like that, so you do not need the same kind of specificity when you're making your brackish water up. You do need to keep a bucket or some sort of reservoir. I keep a 5-gallon bucket, so the most water change I ever do at any one time on this tank is 5 gallons. And I do it by using a half cup of scoop. So that's 4 ounces in a dry measuring scoop. And I just do a nice well-rounded scoop in a 5-gallon bucket of water. Now, I do use my RO water to make up the brackish water. Anytime you're making up salt water or brackish water, you always want to start with the purest water you can. So you want to make it to your needs. Now, if I was using my tap water, it really wouldn't be that big a deal, because once again, the nature of these animals, they can withstand quite a sway in total dissolved solids in their water. With marine animals that are very, very specific, you want to start with known quantities and deal with known quantities, and that can kind of scare you and put you off. You need specific measuring equipment to measure the salinity of the water. You don't need any of that with a brackish tank. All you need to do is be able to take a rough measurement and make up a batch of water. You mix up some 5 gallons of water with some salt in it, and you stir it up, and there's your water. And the reason I keep going on about the animals and the way they can live in water that shifts around so readily is if you do mix up your batch of salt water, your salty water, your brackish water, and you get it a little wrong, you forget how much to put in, or you're running low on salt and you can only put half the amount of salt you normally do in, doesn't make a bit of difference. Just get it, put it back the next water change you do. If you were really in a jam and you had to just do a water change with fresh water and just put fresh water in with the brackish water, it would lower the specific gravity in the tank, but it wouldn't bother the fish at all. It's not an issue. You don't have to go through any kind of acclimation period when you bring the animals home. These animals, by the nature of the animal, they can shift very quickly from one salinity to the next. Typically the animals are called brackish animals, but when I get into the video where I'm actually talking about the animals a little more, that will be made a little more clear. But they're actually euryhaline animals, and that just means a wide range of salinity. So by nature of these animals, they are capable of shifting their own salinity very rapidly to adjust for any changing external environment. So these are not finicky little fish. The systems that you set up or the tanks that you set up do not have to be these, really, really specifically run like machine. It's just not anywhere near the same as running a marine system at all. Very, very easy to do. And on a final note about the maintenance on the tank, the nitrifying bacteria that we all know and love and need so much in our fish tanks is exactly the same species of bacteria in a brackish tank as it is in a freshwater tank. So while with the marine system you need to have good water flow through your sand bed, and you have to have, or it's recommended at least, that you have a good protein skimmer, you don't need any of that on one of these systems. I do have a sponge filter over there. Don't really need it. I just had it installed, and then once it was in there, I've just never really bothered to take it out because it's certainly not hurting anything being in there. But my main filtration and my main biofiltration is simply a little hang on the back filter, and as usual I do a double size filter, so that is a filter that's designed for a 40-gallon tank, and I have it on this 20-gallon tank. But that's really all there is to it. It's no different than maintaining a freshwater tank, except you just have to have a little bit of a reservoir of water. And I know many of you have tap water that comes from a municipal source that you have to let it sit overnight to let the chlorine get out of it and things like that anyway. So the idea of keeping a small reservoir of water is already not daunting. This would just be a case of you'd have to take, if you were using a half cup, if you were using a 5-gallon reservoir, you could take a half cup scoop and just plop a nice well-rounded half cup of marine salts, and I use Instant Ocean brand. It's not difficult to find, and again, a half cup per water change. It lasts a long time, so it's not a huge additional expense. It's really not a big deal. It's not at all like running a marine system. It really isn't. It's more like it's exactly like maintaining a freshwater system, except you just have to have a little bit of brackish water made up. That's the only difference. So next video we will talk more about the animals and why the animals can do what they can do, and so on and so forth. This video has gone on long enough, but those are basically all you need to know about brackish water and a brackish system. If there's anything I left out, or if there's anything I made more confusing for you, by all means go down below, leave a question, leave a comment, just say hello if you want. If you subscribe, you won't miss any updates. And again, the next video about this tank, I will talk much more about the animals and the plants and just the physiology of living in brackish water and making such rapid adjustments to changing salinities. So thanks for watching this one. Hope you enjoyed. As I've already said, go ahead and sub. That way you won't miss the update. And I will see you real soon. Thanks a lot.